George Lytle was born in Clay County, Kentucky in 1845 to a respectable and well-to-do family. His grandfather was the Kentucky militia's General Britain during the War of 1812 and was an important member of society. George's father, he was a successful lawyer, which afforded George the finest education. Heck, by the time he was 16, he had already enrolled in law school. Indeed, George was well on his way, following in his father's footsteps. However, two events would soon happen that would change the course of this young man's promising future. That's right. The first event was when the Civil War broke out. Now, being the respectful patriot that he was, George volunteered for the Confederate Army in March of 1863, and he was quickly assigned to the 13th Kentucky Cavalry. And within a few short months, he found himself on the verge of his first battle. His adrenaline rushed through his veins as his unit prepared to launch into a surprise attack on Union forces. As soon as his commander issued the orders to charge, George fell off his horse and was quickly captured and imprisoned in Ohio. After he swore he would never take up arms against the Union again, George was pardoned in November of 1863. Yet, when he returned home, his mother was gravely ill, and within a few short weeks, she died. Oh, this devastated George, and he quickly turned to moonshine and whiskey to help ease his pain. George began working for his father at his law firm, but he was becoming a public embarrassment and bringing scandal to the family name because he was constantly drunk or sobering up. He was undependable, and every time payday would roll around, old George would disappear on a 3-day drunk. Frustrated, his father told him to get his act together fast or he'd fire him. And that's when George got to thinking, heck, I don't need his help. I'm a grown man. I'm educated, refined, and sophisticated. I'll succeed in any business I set my mind to. And with that, in 1867, George struck out to seek his own fortune and make his own name for himself on his own terms in California. George immediately opened up his own law firm, but after failing to show up in court several times due to being drunk or hungover, word quickly spread about his incompetence, and his practice soon failed. Not to be deterred, George invested all his money that he had left into starting a hog farm, and things seemed to be looking up for George. That is, until a wildfire swept through the area and wiped out all the food and supplies he had for his hogs, and his operation soon went belly up. George was down on his luck and he was broke. He couldn't return back to Kentucky and let his father see what a failure he was. No, sir. He had to come up with a plan to strike it rich, and that's when it hit him. I know what I'll do. I'll rob a stagecoach. I bet I'll get enough money to restart my hog business. But what if I get caught? I'll bring more shame to my family's name. What I need is a good outlaw name. And it was in that moment that George Lytle adopted the alias Dickfellows. Stagecoach robbery was potentially lucrative. You see, when the railroads ended, passengers needed to be transported to their destinations or to the next railhead by coach. Those coaches also carried lots of money in their Wells Fargo strong boxes. And that money, it was used to pay workers, keep businesses running, and supply banks in the growing economic sector. All you needed was a pistol, a place to lie in wait, a steady resolve, and a good fast horse. Dick picked out a spot about a mile outside of town on the main stage road where he decided he would carry out his attack. He hid in the bushes all night until right before sunrise, when he heard the sound of horses in the distance. This is it, the moment of truth, Dick thought to himself. He opened up his revolver, checked his bullets, gave it a good spin, and closed it back. He pulled his bandana over his face to conceal his identity. He was ready. As soon as the stagecoach appeared approaching, it was led by a team of 6 horses and 4 armed guards. But Dick had the element of surprise on his side. And just at the right moment, he sprang out onto the path of the stagecoach and yelled, "Throw down the money box or I'll shoot." The men driving the stagecoach simply cracked the reins and nearly ran over Dick as they rode on by, paying him no mind. Determined, Dick decided that he would try again the next day, and he would pull his pistol on him to show that he meant business. Sure enough, the next day, Dick sprang out of the bushes. He drew his weapon and commanded the driver to throw down the money box. Yet, one of the guards simply aimed his rifle and fired at Dick, with a bullet blowing his hat right off his head, and he quickly ran for his life. Dick went back to the drawing board. He decided that what he needed was a fast horse and a posse to carry out his robbery. The only problem was, he didn't have either. So, a few nights later, Dick rented a horse, and he found a location on the stage road that had about a dozen trees right off the road. He began dressing all the trees with clothes to make each tree look like it was a member of his posse. He figured with a pre-dawn attack, the poor light would give the illusion of an outlaw gang. Sure enough, as the stagecoach approached, Dick jumped into the road, brandishing his pistol, and he demanded that the driver throw down the money box. Surprised, stunned, and feeling like he was outnumbered, the driver threw down the money box and drove away. Dick had done it. Excited, he loaded the money box on his horse, and he promptly began trying to open the money box. But he realized he hadn't actually brought any tools to open it. No problem, he thought. I'll just shoot the lock off. He pulled his pistol out and he fired. Sure enough, it busted the lock. But the sound scared the hell out of his rental horse, who threw the money box off. It landed on Dick's foot and crushed it, while the horse bolted all the way back to town. Dick crawled over and quickly examined the money box, and the only thing that was in it was a letter which had been written in Chinese. Frustrated and empty-handed, Dick had to limp back to town. Over the next 3 years, Dick attempted to rob more than a dozen stagecoaches, and he actually succeeded a few times, and this boosted his confidence. Once, after making off with $200 from a money box, he told the stagecoach driver, "You can tell your grandchildren that you were robbed by Dickfellows." And just like that, the authorities had a name to go with his face, and he soon began appearing on wanted posters nailed to every fence post and every tree along the stage road. Within just a few weeks, Dick was arrested and sent to San Quentin prison for an 8-year sentence for armed robbery. Now that Dick was in prison, deprived of alcohol, he turned into a different man. He was kind and compassionate and remorseful. He became the prison librarian, where he wrote many essays, including letters to Wells Fargo, apologizing for his wrongdoings. He began writing sermons and even became the Sunday school preacher. He made a point of shaking everyone's hands, and he was so well respected that even the prison guards wouldn't cuss around him. The governor of California was so moved by Dick's turnaround, he pardoned him in 1874 after serving only 4 years of his 8-year sentence. Now that Dick was a free man again, he tried to pass himself off as a Spanish teacher, since he had learned the language while he was incarcerated. Yet, there was little need for his services in Southern California, and soon he resorted back to heavy drinking. One day, as he was reading a newspaper, he saw that a Wells Fargo stagecoach carrying their chief detective, James Hume, would be coming through the area. Dick figured that if Hume was on the coach, it must have been carrying a lot of money. And he was right. It had $240,000 in gold. Now, that's over $6.5 million in today's money. Oh, he couldn't resist this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And he quickly formulated a scheme to rob the stagecoach. He rented a horse and he set out for his hideout on the stage road. However, no sooner than Dick got on his horse, the horse threw him off where he hit his head on a rock and knocked him out cold for nearly 8 hours. The horse, seeing that his work was done, simply turned around and walked back to town. While Dick was unconscious, the stagecoach carrying all the gold rode right past him, unharmed. Dick woke up, chagrined. He had missed his big chance. Not to worry, he'd make up for his losses somewhat by robbing the stage on its way back. Now, it wouldn't have as much money on it, but a daring exploit might redeem his self-respect as an outlaw bandit. He stole a replacement horse, and he successfully held up the stagecoach. And now, it was time to take that money box home and get it opened. When he tried to put it on the back of the horse wasn't having any of it. That stubborn beast just simply ran away, leaving Dick on foot in the middle of nowhere. Knowing that a posse would soon be looking for him, he decided he would hide in a nearby railroad construction tunnel, and he headed that way. The problem was, it was already dark, and man, that chest was heavy. While he was dragging the box, there was an 18-foot drop that Dick failed to see, and he fell into the pit, with the box falling on top of him, breaking his ankle, just above the foot that the box had crushed earlier, which increased the scope of his problems. Ever resourceful, he hid in the railroad tunnel, and he used an axe that he stole from the railroad camp. He prized open the box, and there it was, $1,800, and that was a lot better than nothing. The next morning, he hobbled off on handmade crutches to a nearby farm, where he discovered 3 horses in a barn. Finally, this was just the break he'd been looking for. Dick had his pick of privately owned horses. Surely he would have better luck than with those rental horses. With that in mind, he picked the best looking horse, and he set out on his way with his $1,800. Within a couple hours, the homeowner discovered that his horse was missing, and he notified the sheriff. And, as it turns out, they wouldn't have any problems catching up with Dick. You see, the owner had recently shoed the horse that Dick stole, and he ran out of horseshoes in the process. So he had temporarily put a mule shoe on one hoof. The result was that horse left the most distinctive set of tracks, since a mule shoe left different tracks than the horseshoes. Within a couple hours, they led him right to Dick. He immediately surrendered, thinking he was being arrested for robbing a stagecoach. So he promptly handed over his $1,800 loot to the farmer and the sheriff. They had no clue about the robbery, and they simply split the money amongst themselves as payment for their troubles. Just like that, Dick was arrested again. While he was awaiting transport back to San Quentin, he was held in a small town jail. And one night, Dick managed to take the rim of a bucket and fashion a saw out of it. He used it to saw through 2 wooden planks on the floor, and he escaped underneath the jail. He managed to steal some clothes from a clothesline to help conceal his identity, and he made his way to a small farm where the owner's wife spotted him. Now Dick, he was an educated man and a smooth talker, and within a few minutes, he had convinced the lady that he was a traveling salesman. So she offered to cook him breakfast, which he gladly accepted. However, as he made his way towards the house, several of the farm hands recognized Dick from some wanted posters they had seen. It turns out there was an $800 bounty for his arrest. They immediately notified their foreman. Then the owner and several men confronted Dick while he was enjoying his home-cooked meal. Dick looked up, and he saw the owner pointing a pistol at his head. Ever resourceful, Dick pretended to surrender before smacking the pistol out of the owner's hand, who managed to squeeze off one round before he dropped the gun. The bullet hit Dick in the same foot that had been crushed by the horse. And just like that, Dick was arrested in 1875 and sent back to San Quentin for another 8-year prison sentence. Back in prison and deprived of alcohol again, Dick was a genuinely remorseful man. He was compassionate for all his other inmates, and he worked as a lawyer on all their legal cases for free. He even started a school of moral instruction in the prison, where he taught inmates the art of being a gentleman. And once again, he assumed the role of preacher in the prison church on Sundays. Once the new California governor saw what a model prisoner Dick was, he pardoned him again in 1881 after serving only 6 years. Now a free man again, Dick tried his hand at several lines of work, but couldn't find one that suited him as well as robbing stagecoaches. And within 2 months, he was back at it again. By now, Dick had been robbing stagecoaches for nearly 14 years, and he had successfully robbed over a dozen Wells Fargo coaches. And by 1881, Wells Fargo had had enough. They sent a small militia led by their head detective to hunt him down and capture him once and for all. They formed a dragnet and they tightened their circle around him, and within a few months, the posse had captured Dick. Since it was late, they decided to set up camp for the night. They tied Dick's hands together to make sure he didn't try anything funny and try to escape. After dinner, the Wells Fargo men were having several drinks to celebrate the capture of the fugitive. And before long, they were all drunk. Seeing his opportunity, Dick began telling the men how impressed he was with their capture techniques. He had never seen a group so talented and clever. He was pouring it on thick. And the detectives, they were soaking the praise up, when suddenly, even though his fists were tied, Dick punched the lead detective square in the face. In the confusion, Dick quickly stole one of their horses, and he headed off into the night. But within 50 yards, the horse stepped in a gopher hole and tripped, throwing Dick to the ground, and the horse landed on top of Dick and pinned him there until he was arrested again. The next day, he was taken to a local jail to await transport to Folsom Prison when Dick stole a deputy's gun and he ran out the back door in an alley and he took off. He was free again. He ran out of the alley and lo and behold, there was a horse. It didn't have a saddle on it, so Dick just jumped on it bareback and off they went. Now he didn't know it, but the horse was recovering from eating wild loco weed, and the horse was just flat out stoned. Within a few seconds, Dick was sent flying off the horse, and he was arrested again, and he was sentenced to Folsom Prison for a life sentence with no parole in 1881. There's no way he would ever see the world outside of those prison walls again. Or would he? Well, in 1906, after serving 25 years of his life sentence, Dick's Kentucky family had finally tracked him down, and being the wealthy family that they were, they petitioned the California governor to pardon him, and the governor agreed on one condition. Dick had to move back to Kentucky and never set foot in California again. All the parties agreed, and the paperwork was completed, and just like that, Dick was free again. However, the rest of this story remains a mystery. You see, Dick never returned to Kentucky. That's right. There are no records that document he ever set foot there again. And there are no records to show that he died in Kentucky. He simply disappeared and was never seen again. One thing we can be sure of, though, is that wherever he went, I'm gonna bet that he walked there, because I'm positive that he didn't ride a horse.